You'd assume that owning a Formula One team is one of the most expensive ways to lose money in sports, a billionaire's vanity project, burning hundreds of millions a year to watch a car occasionally cross a finish line first. That used to be exactly true. It isn't anymore, and the reason why is one of the most dramatic financial transformations in modern sports business. Start with a number that should immediately confuse you. In 2025, Ferrari collected the largest prize money payout of any team on the grid, over $277 million. Ferrari finished fourth in the Constructors' Championship that year. It did not win a single race. McLaren won both championships and still took home less money. If you assumed prize money in F1 works like it does in most sports, you win, you get paid, that result makes no sense at all. Here's the mechanism underneath it. Formula One's prize pool is split with roughly 75% based on where a team finished in the previous season's championship, and about 20% reserved for historical performance, top 3 championship finishes stretching back a decade. Ferrari's brand alone is worth extra money under this system, independent of what the car actually does on a Sunday. The team isn't just being paid for speed. It's being paid for the fact that it's Ferrari. For 6 decades of accumulated prestige that a competitor literally cannot replicate no matter how good their car is next season. That's the first sign that an F1 team is not really a racing operation. It's closer to a media and brand company that happens to compete in a race. Now here's where the deeper story starts, because none of this, the payouts, the brand premium, the profitability, existed in anything like this form even 5 years ago. Go back to 2021, and the picture looks almost unrecognizable. Only Mercedes and Red Bull were turning a profit that year, somewhere between $10 and $20 million, on budgets close to $450 million. The other 8 teams were lucky to break even. Spending had no ceiling. If a rival found an extra tenth of a second by throwing another $50 million at wind tunnel testing, you either matched it or fell further behind. It was an arms race with no armistice, and it was slowly killing the teams that couldn't keep up. That's exactly what happened to Force India in 2018. The team had been a legitimate midfield competitor for most of the decade, scoring points, occasionally standing on the podium, running on a fraction of what Ferrari or Mercedes spent. But a fraction of an unlimited number is still an unsustainable number. Ownership disputes and mounting debts caught up with the team mid-season, and it went into administration, a formal insolvency process, while cars were still on the grid. The team was saved only because a consortium led by Lawrence Stroll bought the assets almost immediately, restarting it under a new entity before the season even finished. It's a strange, specific kind of collapse, a team competitive enough to score points on Saturday, insolvent enough to need rescuing by Monday. That gap between sporting relevance and financial survival is exactly what F1's spending arms race produced across most of the grid. The sports answer, introduced for the 2021 season, was the cost cap, a hard ceiling on what a team could spend on car performance in a given year. Teams are currently permitted to spend around $140 million to go racing, rising toward $215 million for 2026 once new technical regulations widen what counts inside the cap. On the surface, that sounds like a simple rule to stop overspending. What it actually did was rewire the entire business model of Formula One. Once every team's maximum cost became predictable, and prize money kept climbing as the sport's broader commercial revenue grew, something changed that had never been true before. A well-run F1 team became almost mathematically guaranteed to be profitable. You can no longer spend your way into bankruptcy chasing performance, because the spending itself is capped by regulation. That single change is why the team Lawrence Stroll rescued out of administration in 2018, rebranded Aston Martin, is now valued in the billions, alongside every other team on the grid. The same organization that couldn't pay its bills 7 years ago now sits inside a franchise system that makes insolvency almost structurally impossible. That's the counterintuitive core of the whole industry. The average F1 team is now valued at roughly $3.42 billion, up from an era when teams were traded for symbolic sums. Ferrari sits near $6.5 billion, Mercedes near $5.9 billion, and even backmarker teams carry valuations comfortably above $1 billion, not because they're winning championships, but because the cost cap guarantees they can no longer bleed money the way they once did. The value isn't really in the trophies. It's in the scarcity of the entry itself. There are only ever a handful of seats at this table, and when Cadillac joined as the 11th team for 2026, it had to pay a $450 million anti-dilution fee split among the existing 10 teams, a one-time price of admission that effectively set the floor for what a grid spot is worth. That's not a racing expense. That's the cost of a scarce license, priced the way you'd price a seat on a stock exchange, not a spot on a starting grid. Follow that chain to its logical conclusion. Capped spending created financial predictability. Predictability turned teams into reliably profitable businesses instead of vanity projects. Reliable profit, combined with a strictly limited number of available seats, turned team ownership into an appreciating financial asset. And that appreciating asset is now attracting an entirely different kind of buyer. Private equity groups, sovereign wealth funds, and investors who may never set foot in a garage, buying equity stakes in teams the way they'd buy shares in any high-margin, scarce-supply business. So what does owning an F1 team actually look like today? In the best case, you own a heritage brand like Ferrari, capped spending, guaranteed prize money, a historical bonus that pays out regardless of results, and sponsorship revenue that treats your logo as premium real estate. In the realistic middle case, you own a midfield team like Williams or Haas, not winning championships, but structurally protected from the kind of overspending that used to bankrupt teams in that exact position, with a valuation climbing steadily in the background regardless of where you finish. There isn't much of a genuine failure case left in the current system, and that itself is the story. The old failure case, going bankrupt mid-season the way Force India did, is precisely what the cost cap was built to make almost impossible. So the honest answer to what you're really buying isn't a racing team at all. It's a permanently scarce membership in a global entertainment business, one where the cars are almost incidental to the economics happening underneath them, an asset that gets more valuable the longer nobody else is allowed to buy their way onto the grid.